Without a doubt, the single biggest anticipation in the Star Citizen community is the arrival of the Pyro system and server meshing. The second star system in Star Citizen will usher in a massive dump of new content, change the dynamic of the game and community, and be the biggest sign of Star Citizen's inevitable progress forward. Today, I'm going to give you the full tour on everything we know about this system, how it's progressed over the years, and why we know for sure it's actually coming this time. This is the May exclusive video for all Space Tomato supporters. If you aren't already one, consider joining for more videos like this. And thank you for supporting my Tomato Talks. Officially discovered in 2493, the next system in Star Citizen is called the Pyro System, named after Pyrotechnic Amalgamated. This company was a mining concern that staked a claim in the system before running itself dry and having to end business. See, the system's star is a bit violent. It sends out massive pulses of radiation that require everybody in the system to have some form of protection, something we'll definitely be dealing with in-game. Before this massive company left, though, they created pockets of human activity, as well as a massive terraforming space station. That space station, being the population center of the system, quickly descended into centuries of power struggles, and has changed hands many times as various gangs fight to rule over the dangerous frontier. Due to the growing danger of the system and the difficult environment to live in, it was never repopulated, and no overarching order has ever formed. That hasn't stopped lone adventurers, salvagers, miners, and even cargo haulers from using the system, though. Not only does it still consist of many valuable small pockets of resources to find and obtain, it is a bit of a jump point nucleus with 6 other systems connected. Pyro is by no means an unused system. However, it is unclaimed, unpatrolled, and unregulated. This is the Wild West of Star Citizen at the moment. And while you'll find plenty of friendly folks around the scattered remote outposts of the system, there won't be any cities or major space stations for you to return to for help or for a place to stay. It's a dangerous place, and it's sure to be a completely different experience from Stanton. But we still don't know too much about it as of the writing of this video. Let's look at what we do know, and how the Pyro system has developed throughout the years. The first real signs that Pyro might be the next system in Star Citizen started back in 2017. Back then, the idea of a new system didn't seem so far away based on some pretty ridiculous projections from Chris. But the question still hung in the air for everybody as speculation ran rampant. Until Chris made this comment.
And that little the red cluster you see up there is actually the Pyro system. So when we leave Stanton, that will be one of our destinations.
By this time, the guesses had already called it, but now players felt they had more reason to suspect it. Many in the community made very convincing arguments pointing to this possibility, as well as bringing up the connectivity between the 2 other systems in progress, Nyx and Odin, as well as the features that make Pyro a good choice. However, nothing was officially confirmed until CitizenCon of 2019, when we got a sneak peek at the approach and entrance into the Pyro system. But we didn't really get to see the Pyro system. It was only a brief glance at what was most likely not any sort of real functional space. And then we started seeing mentions of the system receiving work across multiple 2020 monthly reports. The cat was out of the bag at that point, so progress reports came in steady throughout the year, sometimes even with some visuals to accompany. Of course, around this time, the whole world was realizing that things were not going to be progressing like normal for a while. On top of that, CIG was off on their estimates, no surprise there, and the Pyro system would end up not being ready to be played or even shown off in 2020. Instead, we would continue to see Pyro sneak peeks in monthly reports and weekly developer videos, while we also got to see the colonialism outposts in production, which would carry much of Pyro's style and design with it. We never got a good sense of what Pyro represented outside of lore until CitizenCon 2021. Right out of the gate, Pyro struck a different chord from Stanton. The moons of Stanton represent some fairly extraterrestrial atmospheres, but what we're seeing from the desolate lands of Pyro inspires a new sense of isolation. And the first preview representing this to us does a phenomenal job at selling it. Will it live up to that? I don't know. But what we've already been able to discern from much of the footage we saw at CitizenCon 2021 and beyond is more than you might realize. For starters, we already have a little bit of footage of almost every planet in the system. Pyro 1 is a charred black rock, disincorporating into the star, a lonely home for the isolated and very difficult to navigate around. It features some fascinating rock formations and bioluminescent plants. Pyro 2 is a red and white planet, also quite isolating to its inhabitants. It is often covered in dense fog and dotted with massive tendrils of stone shooting from the ground. These eerie displays match the creepy legends of the Prophet of Pyro, which originate from this planet. You'll also find liquid seas here, which aren't as creepy. Pyro 3 is a definitively breathable world as seen in the gameplay preview at the show, and features heavy cloud layers, bright yellow foliage, and liquid oceans. Pyro 4 is a brown desert-like world that reminds me of the United States Southwest. It's littered with small shrubs, rock columns, and rock arches similar to Pyro 2. Pyro 5 is a vivid yellow gas giant with the only 6 moons in the system orbiting. And Pyro 6 is the only planet we haven't actually seen, so I can't help you there. But it is the furthest planet from the star in a massive system, which will make it quite an anomaly in the game. It is also the home to Ruined Station, the main landing zone in the system. By the way, I hadn't mentioned before, this system is almost 3 times the size of Stanton, so these distances between planets are going to be much different from what you're used to in the regular game. While we haven't seen Ruined Station very much at the time of this writing, we've had tons of insight into the other smaller space stations that will sparsely populate the system, much like Stanton's Lagrange point stations. While they're quite similar in shape and design, the centuries without use and upkeep in Pyro has left them broken and practically uninhabitable. The areas inside are filled with shops and outlaws, but the actual state of the place is miserable. The heat is centralized and leaves the corridors abandoned. The scaffolding is collapsing, revealing crawl spaces above where anybody might hide, and on the outside, massive space shantytowns congregate near the station, complicating ship approaches and endangering those living inside. Many of the stations lie in waste and have no personnel, waiting to be explored by the adventurous citizen, and some feature a design unknown to players so far. These stations look like they'll be adding a plethora of new experiences alongside the colonialism ground outposts we'll be finding planetside. These outposts are what we have the most information on in the system, so keep an eye out for a full feature deep dive next quarter on the channel. For now, let's look at the basics of what will be offered. We'll be seeing 2 different types of outposts in this first content push: colonialism outposts and derelict outposts. These derelict outposts represent the long abandoned nature of the Pyro system. They aren't something you would find in Stanton, and might not even be incredibly popular in Pyro. They will be expanded upon for other systems and biomes as we see new systems though. They look to provide a chance for platforming, exploring for rare items, and possibly some stories to piece together in combination with the lore. We still don't know a ton about them, but they've been a surprise addition having only been started in 2022. We'll see how their gameplay might differ from what's already offered as the year rolls on. Colonialism outposts, on the other hand, have been in the production stage for almost 2 years now, with regular updates since summer of 2019. We've seen them go from 2D sketch to fully in-game, and while the only thing we can be truly sure will be included with these new locations are the locations themselves, they've proven to be a huge point of focus for the company. And I think there'll be a platform for quite a bit of new future gameplay being packaged with Pyro as well. These outposts might be friendly locations looking to sell to you, feed you, and give you a place to rest, or they could be heavily guarded compounds where you can stealth your way in, find alternate paths, take some loot, and do a little bit of role-playing. They seem to be open locations that can be approached in a multitude of ways, but like most locations, the interesting part will be the gameplay inside. Now, the gameplay I'm showing you currently is probably a mock-up. So we might actually not get gameplay exactly like this, but I do hope this is the direction that it goes in. Now, what will probably be the most polarizing and noticeable difference between the Pyro system and not just the Stanton system, but most other systems in the game, are the factions. While we deal, destroy, and dunk on the various companies which own the planets of the Stanton system, Pyro is a lawless frontier. And while there are no laws, the local games will act as a stand-in for those corporations. As you travel through the system, you'll need to stay wary of whose territory you're in, and what you need to do to get through it. We don't know the complexity that will be present in the reputation system by this time, but I would expect to have to make a lot of difficult decisions surrounding who you work with and where you spend your fleeting moments. So now we get to the difficult part. When does all this happen? Our most recent estimates from the company as of May of 2022 place it sometime in Q1 of 2023, but I more likely believe Q2 of the same year. Regardless of what is said, let's look at the progress we can actually see towards the various aspects we know are included. The top indicator of when the new star system will come is the progress tracker, and its representation of server meshing implementation. We've recently received news that persistent entity streaming is finally working at the studio, one of the biggest milestones on the path to static server meshing. But there's plenty more work to be done yet, and that's only considering what we can see. This is in contrast to the vast majority of Pyro's actual in-game work being done by Q3 of this year. The timelines do work out quite well for testing towards the end of the year, but ultimately there is no way Pyro will release without server meshing. All signs point to the team being right where they want to be on their progress towards a 2022 server meshing testing branch in the PTU, but we all know that's not how things really are. So we can only make speculative guesses based on what we see in the discussion surrounding Pyro instead. The outposts have been visible in development for longer than the very planets they sit on, which we know they've actually been placed on as of January of 2022. We've seen them in gameplay scenarios, white box development, gray box development, and so on. Even if Pyro wasn't coming, these would no doubt be ready for our existence space. And we can expect to see even more variants of these outposts that will come after Pyro's initial release. The planets also seem to be coming along, with many showing up in a Pyro art sizzle reel last year, but there is no knowing how much of this is fully completed as opposed to sculpted for these scenes. They are being quite hush-hush about these planets, and I hope they continue to do so up until launch. The space locations in the verse are some of the newer locations to start to be shown off, having only reached a general design phase at the time of this video. We're looking at some massive new spaces with actually mysterious looking areas to explore. These locations actually look like they'll be one of the last locations to be finalized based on their progress now, but we'll see. The gas clouds and spacescaping is likely one of the more familiar additions being brought to the Pyro system that we've already seen in previews, and it seems to be taking over as the main highlight of space locations as opposed to asteroids in Stanton. Then there is the elephant in the room, the most important part of the system, the information we have learned virtually nothing about so far, the gangs. We know lore and names, but we haven't seen anything about specific mission givers, the type of missions one might expect, how so-called rule breaking might be handled, or how we will interact with the games themselves. The narrative side of Pyro development has been void of information, which is the only part of the system I'm really worried about. I simply don't know what to expect here, and I think it'll be the biggest question mark going into this all for me. However, for a good understanding, it might be best to just look back at Freelancer. So when you take all of these different aspects of the system that need to come along, like server meshing, persistent entity streaming, persistent hangars, and several other key pieces of tech, you can start to understand why there is so much buzz and anticipation surrounding this update. This is an initiative that touches just about every developer working on Star Citizen, and it's good to remember that, given everything we know, neither I nor anybody else can tell you when exactly Pyro is coming, but we can see plenty of the progress being made, and it's very clear that the studio is very much on the road to the second system. And that's not the only system being worked on. System number 3, Nyx, is right behind Pyro, and should be in the game in the following year or two. It remains to be seen if they can speed up system development like they did with ships, planets, and points of interest, but it's exciting to know a third segment of the game will also be coming relatively soon. I'd like to thank all of my supporters for helping me create exclusive videos like this. If you want more of these and haven't seen them, make sure to check out the playlist on my front page. And if you aren't yet a supporter, continue joining for more videos like this. I hope you learned something new in this one, and I'll catch you in the next.